Just for a moment. The cold, metallic sound echoed through the air. The plasma blade was about to cut through Queen Zaloria's royal armor, but a shadow suddenly lunged forward, shielding her from the blow. Blood splattered. The person's heart skipped a beat, and the fate of two worlds became eternally intertwined. The scarlet skies of planet Zaloria hung heavy over the northern battlefields of Hangar Valley. Ruins, bomb craters, and the remnants of spacecraft littered the landscape, all covered in ash. It was the final day of the Blue Blood Month in the year 2741 of the Empire, and Queen Cirilla Zaloria stood at the edge of what was once a thriving settlement, now reduced to a wasteland by the ongoing war with the Syndicate. Her slender figure was adorned in royal battle armor, scales of Zalorian dragon plated with black gold, shimmering under the weak sunlight. Her elongated ears twitched slightly as she surveyed the devastation, violet blue eyes narrowing with determination. The Zalorian Empire had been weakened by generations of warfare, and its people were exhausted. Yet the Syndicate continued its brutal campaign to overthrow the throne. In the distance, a small contingent of Earth mercenaries was setting up a defensive perimeter. Their alliance with Zaloria was new, bringing advanced plasma weapons that gave the Empire an edge, though many Zalorians remained deeply suspicious of these aliens from a distant planet. Among the mercenaries was Jimmy Hawk Carson, a rugged man in his 30s, with a shaved head and an irreverent attitude. He carried a gleaming blue plasma cannon slung over his shoulder, which he had affectionately named Betsy. "Come on, girl," he murmured to the weapon as he calibrated its settings. "Let's show these Zalorians what Earth tech can really do." His fellow mercenaries chuckled, but their laughter quickly died as a distant explosion rocked the ground beneath their feet. Syndicate forces approaching the Black Healer's Bridge," crackled a voice over their comms. "All units, prepare for engagement." Jimmy secured his position on a small hill overlooking the bridge. Through his scope, he could see Queen Cirilla leading her royal guard forward, her armor catching the last rays of the dying sun. "Royalty on the front lines," he muttered. "These Zalorians sure do things differently." The first wave of Syndicate fighters appeared on the horizon, their black armor absorbing light rather than reflecting it. At their head was a figure cloaked in darkness, wielding a staff that pulsed with ominous purple energy, a death priest of the Seven Stars cult, the spiritual arm of the Syndicate. The battle began with a thunderous exchange of plasma fire. Blue and purple energy bolts crisscrossed the air, illuminating the darkening sky. Jimmy fired Betsy with practiced precision, each shot finding its mark among the Syndicate forces. From his vantage point, he could see Queen Cirilla fighting with surprising skill, her royal blade slicing through enemy armor with ease. Her guard formed a protective circle around her, but the Syndicate forces were pressing them hard. Then, in a moment that would alter the course of two worlds, Jimmy spotted a shimmer of movement in the shadows behind the Queen. A Syndicate assassin had somehow slipped past the royal guard, a violet plasma blade raised to strike. Without thinking, Jimmy abandoned his position and sprinted toward the Queen. Time seemed to slow as he closed the distance, watching the assassin's blade begin its deadly arc toward Cirilla's neck. "Your Majesty!" he shouted, hurling himself forward just as the blade descended. The purple plasma sword sliced through his armor and flesh, instead of the Queen's. A searing pain engulfed his side as he collapsed to the ground, his vision blurring. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Queen Cirilla whirling around, her own blade flashing as she dispatched the assassin with a single, precise strike. "Get the human to the Royal Medical Bay on the Crystalline flagship immediately." Her voice seemed to come from very far away. "He has invoked the life debt." Jimmy awoke to the sterile whiteness of the Royal Medical Bay aboard the Crystalline flagship. The air smelled of silver ash and antiseptic. Through half-open eyes, he could see Zalorian medical engineers working with mechanical arms, weaving a network of silver-blue plasma around his wound. The silver fire net, a biological plasma web designed to neutralize the poison from the Syndicate's blade. He tried to move, but found himself immobilized by pain. A groan escaped his lips, drawing the attention of a figure standing nearby. Queen Cyrilla approached his bedside, her royal armor replaced by more formal attire, though no less regal. "You're awake," she stated, her tone somewhere between relief and surprise. "Just barely," Jimmy rasped, attempting a smile. "Got any old-fashioned milkshakes in this fancy ship of yours?" The Queen's elongated ears twitched in what he assumed was irritation. "You speak of refreshments when you nearly lost your life?" "Humor helps with the pain," Jimmy replied, wincing as a particularly sharp jolt shot through his side. "Part of being human. Your Majesty." "You saved my life," Cyrilla said, her violet blue eyes studying him intently. "Do you understand what that means in our culture?" Jimmy shook his head slightly, immediately regretting the movement as pain lanced through him again. "It invokes an ancient tradition called the life debt," she explained. "When one saves the life of royalty, their life becomes bound to the royal family." "Wait, what?" Jimmy struggled to sit up despite the protests of the medical staff. "Are you saying I'm now your, property?" "Not property," Cyrilla corrected, her ears flattening slightly in what might have been offense. "You are now a royal bodyguard, bound by honor to protect me until the debt is repaid." "So I'm supposed to be your watchdog?" Jimmy asked incredulously. "I'm a mercenary, Your Majesty. I'm here for a paycheck, not to play knight in shining armor." Cyrilla's expression hardened. "The life debt is not negotiable. It is our most sacred tradition. You will be inducted into the Royal Guard as soon as you recover." Before Jimmy could protest further, she turned and swept out of the medical bay, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the constant hum of the silver plasma web knitting his flesh back together. Over the next few days, as Jimmy's wound slowly healed, he was introduced to the Zalorian Royal Council. The reception was cold at best. The Zalorian guards looked down on humans, considering them undisciplined and unreliable. Jimmy's shaved head, plasma cannon, and constant jokes only seemed to reinforce their prejudice. Elder Kirol, a weathered Zalorian with ceremonial scars across his elongated ears, was particularly vocal in his disapproval. "Your Majesty," he addressed Cyrilla during a council meeting that Jimmy was forced to attend. "Binding the royal life to that of a lesser species is unprecedented and, frankly, beneath your station." Jimmy bit back a retort, knowing it would only make things worse. Instead, he focused on the other council members, trying to gauge which ones might be potential allies. Sir Azor, the captain of the Royal Guard and a veteran of countless Zalorian campaigns, studied Jimmy with a mixture of skepticism and reluctant curiosity. "The human fought well at the Battle of Black Healer's Bridge," he admitted grudgingly. "But one act of bravery does not make him worthy of the Royal Guard. The Earth Alliance has been instrumental in our recent victories against the Syndicate," Cyrilla countered. "And this human, Jimmy Carson, saved my life without hesitation. The life debt has been invoked, and I will honor our traditions." Whispers spread through the council chamber. "The royal family, life-bound to someone from an inferior planet?" Jimmy shifted uncomfortably in his new Zalorian-style uniform, which felt restrictive compared to his mercenary gear. He missed the familiar weight of Betsy, which had been confiscated when he was brought aboard the flagship. As the meeting dragged on, Jimmy's attention was drawn to a young Zalorian medic attending to the council members. Nurse Tellen had been one of the medical staff who helped save his life, and unlike most Zalorians, she seemed genuinely interested in humans and Earth culture. She had explained the silver fire net procedure to him in terms he could understand, and had even smuggled in Earth-style food when she discovered how much he disliked Zalorian cuisine. The council meeting was interrupted by a sudden alarm. The flagship's warning systems blared as the ship rocked violently. Syndicate forces have located the flagship, Sir Azor announced, already drawing his weapon. They've launched a plasma missile squadron. Queen Cirilla rose to her feet, her royal composure unshaken. Battle stations, Sir Azor, coordinate our defense. She turned to Jimmy. It seems your first test as royal bodyguard has arrived sooner than expected. Earthman. Jimmy was hastily equipped with Zolorian battle armor, which felt awkward and too tight in places. To his relief, Betsy was returned to him, though with restrictions on its power settings. Try not to shoot any of our own people, Sir Azor said dryly, as they hurried to the bridge. The Crystalline's bridge was a marvel of Zolorian engineering, with crystalline view screens that shifted colors based on the energy flowing through them. Through these screens, Jimmy could see the approaching Syndicate vessels, sleek, black shapes against the starry void. The first volley of plasma missiles struck the flagship's shields, causing the entire ship to shudder. Emergency lights flashed as damage reports flooded in from various sectors. Shields at 70%, reported a Zolorian officer. Enemy fighters approaching from all vectors. Jimmy took up position near Queen Cirilla, who stood calmly at the command platform, issuing orders with the composure of someone who had faced death many times before. Hawk, she addressed him, using his mercenary nickname for the first time. You claimed your earth weapons are superior. Now is the time to prove it. The battle was chaotic and intense. Syndicate boarding parties breached the lower decks, forcing the crew to engage in close-quarters combat. Jimmy, despite his unfamiliarity with Zolorian battle tactics, proved remarkably effective. His experience as a mercenary had taught him to adapt quickly, and Betsy's firepower was undeniable. He stayed close to the Queen, covering her flank as she led a counterattack against the boarders. Her fighting style was elegant yet deadly, a stark contrast to Jimmy's more straightforward approach. During a particularly fierce exchange, a squad of Syndicate combat robots broke through to the command deck. One of them fired a plasma grenade that threatened to take out the ship's gravitational stabilizers. Without hesitation, Jimmy threw himself in front of Queen Cirilla, using his body as a shield against the explosion. The blast knocked him back several feet, but his Zolorian armor absorbed most of the impact. As the smoke cleared, he found himself looking up at Cirilla, who had drawn her royal blade and dispatched two of the robots with lightning-fast strikes. That's twice now you've placed yourself between me and death, she remarked as she helped him to his feet. Perhaps there is more to humans than I initially thought. Jimmy managed a pained grin. Just doing my job as your royal watchdog, Your Majesty. For the first time, he saw something like amusement flicker across her regal features. Indeed. The Syndicate attack was eventually repelled, but not without cost. Parts of the Crystalline had sustained heavy damage, and many Zolorian crew members were wounded or killed. As the flagship limped away to a safer position, Jimmy found himself being viewed differently by the Zolorian crew. His actions during the battle had earned him, if not respect, at least a degree of tolerance. Even Sir Azor grudgingly acknowledged his contribution. You fight well for a human, he said, during the post-battle assessment, though your techniques lack discipline. Yeah, well, discipline doesn't always win fights, Jimmy retorted. Sometimes you need a bit of chaos to throw the enemy off balance. Sir Azor's ears twitched in what Jimmy was beginning to recognize as the Zolorian equivalent of a thoughtful nod. Perhaps there is wisdom in that, in moderation. The attack had also changed something in Queen Cirilla's perception of Jimmy. As she observed him across the smoke-filled bridge, she saw something beyond the irreverent exterior, a hardened warrior with a surprising capacity for loyalty. Meanwhile, Jimmy was beginning to understand that his debt extended beyond mere protection. The Syndicate's bold attack on the royal flagship indicated that their threat to Zoloria was growing. If he was bound to the Queen's safety, then he had a stake in helping her defeat the Syndicate once and for all. In the days that followed, Queen Cirilla called a Grand Council of the Elders to announce a formal alliance with Earth humans. The grand hall of the crystalline was transformed for the occasion, with ancient Zalorian banners hanging from the ceiling and ceremonial guards lining the walls. Jimmy, now officially inducted as a royal bodyguard, stood uncomfortably at attention behind the Queen's throne, aware of the scrutiny from the assembled Zalorian nobility. "The time has come," Sarilla addressed the council, her voice carrying across the hushed chamber, "for Zaloria to embrace new allies in our fight against the Syndicate. The humans of Earth have proven their worth in battle, and their technological expertise complements our own strengths." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Elder Kirill rose to his feet, his ceremonial robes rustling with the movement. "Your Majesty," he began, his tone respectful but firm. "While I acknowledge the tactical advantages of this alliance, I must express concern about allowing outsiders such proximity to our sacred traditions. The life debt is one matter, but a formal alliance? There are those among us who fear the humans will eventually usurp our authority and erode our ways." High Commander Karma, a stern-faced military leader with battle scars across her face, nodded in agreement. "The humans lack the discipline and honor that have defined Zalorian society for millennia. How can we trust them as true allies?" Sarilla gestured for Jimmy to step forward. He did so reluctantly, feeling the weight of hundreds of pairs of elongated Zalorian eyes upon him. "James Carson of Earth," she introduced him formally, "a human who has twice placed himself between royal blood and death. Speak, and let the council hear the voice of humanity." Jimmy cleared his throat, suddenly wishing he had prepared something. Diplomacy had never been his strong suit. "Look," he began. Deciding honesty was his best approach. "I can't speak for all humans. We're as different from each other as you Zalorians probably are. But I can tell you this. Earth forces came to help Zaloria because we believe in fighting against tyranny, wherever it exists. The Syndicate threatens not just your world, but potentially ours too. I didn't save the Queen because of some grand plan to infiltrate your society. I did it because it was the right thing to do. That's what humans, at our best, stand for." His words were met with mixed reactions, some nods of approval, others scoffs of disbelief. Before the debate could continue, Sir Azor burst into the chamber, his expression grave. "Your Majesty," he announced, "we've discovered evidence of Syndicate infiltration within the palace staff. They may be planning an assassination attempt during this very council." The chamber erupted in chaos as nobles demanded to know how such a breach could occur. Amid the commotion, Jimmy noticed a subtle movement near the back of the hall, a palace attendant reaching inside his robes with unusual precision. Without waiting for orders, Jimmy pushed through the crowd toward the suspicious figure. The attendant, realizing he had been spotted, abandoned subtlety and drew a concealed plasma dagger, lunging toward the dais where Queen Sarilla stood. "Assassin!" Jimmy shouted, drawing the attention of the royal guards. The would-be killer, a corrupted Zalorian working for the Syndicate, charged forward with inhuman speed. His target was clear, Queen Sarilla's throat. Jimmy intercepted the assassin just before he reached the Queen. But in the struggle, he lost his footing. The plasma blade sliced across his shoulder and grazed Sarilla's neck. Jimmy's blood spattered onto the Queen's ceremonial robes as he cried out in pain. The assassin, momentarily thrown off balance by Jimmy's intervention, was quickly surrounded by royal guards. But he wasn't finished. With a twisted smile, he activated a hidden device that began to emit a high-pitched whine. "For the 7 stars," he shouted. "Death to the old ways." Recognizing the sound of a plasma bomb about to detonate, Jimmy lunged forward despite his injury, tackling the assassin and dragging him away from the Queen and the assembled nobles. With the last of his strength, he pushed the struggling Zalorian toward the chamber's grand window. "Sir Azor!" he called out. "Shoot the window!" The captain of the guard understood immediately. His plasma rifle fired, shattering the crystal pane. The vacuum of space beckoned beyond, and Jimmy, with one final effort, shoved the assassin through the opening. Emergency force fields activated immediately, sealing the breach, but not before the bomb detonated safely outside the ship, its purple flare briefly illuminating the darkness. Jimmy collapsed to the floor, blood seeping from his shoulder wound. The Grand Council chamber had fallen silent, every Zalorian present staring at the human who had, for the third time, risked his life to protect their queen. Cirilla descended from the dais, her ceremonial robes stained with Jimmy's blood. She knelt beside him as medical staff rushed forward. "Twice you placed yourself between me and death," she said softly, so that only he could hear. "Now you have done so a third time. No Zalorian in our history has ever owed such a debt." Jimmy managed a weak smile. "Maybe you can let me have that milkshake now, Your Majesty." As Jimmy was rushed to the medical bay once again, the mood in the Grand Council had shifted dramatically. Even Elder Kirol and Commander Karma stood in thoughtful silence, their previous objections seeming hollow in the face of such selfless bravery. Sir Azor stepped forward, his battle-hardened face solemn. "James Carson has demonstrated the true meaning of loyalty and honor. He has shown us that courage knows no species." The tide of opinion had turned. The attempted assassination, rather than weakening the proposed alliance, had instead cemented it in the most powerful way possible, through blood and sacrifice. In the medical bay, Jimmy once again found himself under the silver fire net, its glowing tendrils working to heal his newest wound. Nurse Tellen tended to him with gentle efficiency, her expression a mixture of concern and admiration. "You have become something of a legend among the crew," she told him as she adjusted the healing plasma field. "The human who bleeds for our queen." "Not exactly how I planned to make friends," Jimmy groaned, the pain medication making his head swim. "I was thinking more along the lines of sharing drinks and swapping war stories." Tellen's ears twitched in amusement. "Perhaps there will be time for that, once you are healed. The Queen has ordered your immediate promotion to Royal Knight, an honor never before granted to a non-Zalorian." Jimmy frowned. "I didn't sign up to be knighted. I just want to finish my contract and head back to Earth. No offense to your queen, but this life debt thing is getting a bit much." "The life debt is sacred," Tellen replied seriously. "But perhaps it need not be a burden. You have earned the respect of many who previously doubted you, including Sir Azor." "And the Queen?" Jimmy couldn't help asking. "Does she still see me as just an obligation?" Tellen's expression softened. "I believe the Queen sees you differently now. She has visited while you were unconscious, sitting at your bedside for hours." This revelation surprised Jimmy. He had assumed Cirilla's interest in his recovery was purely political, a monarch ensuring her unexpected ally remained alive to serve her purposes. Meanwhile, in her private chambers, Queen Cirilla was facing her own internal crisis. The traditional life debt was meant to bind a loyal Zalorian to the royal family, not an unpredictable human mercenary. Yet Jimmy Carson had now saved her life 3 times, accumulating a debt that had no precedent in Zalorian history. More troubling were the feelings his actions had stirred in her. As queen, she had been trained from birth to keep her emotions tightly controlled, to view all relationships through the lens of political advantage. But there was something about the human's irreverent humor, his disregard for protocol, and his undeniable courage that had begun to breach her carefully constructed walls. "Your Majesty," Sir Azor announced himself at her chamber door. "I bring news from the Intelligence Division." Cirilla composed herself, pushing thoughts of Jimmy aside. "Enter." Sir Azor bowed as he entered, then straightened to deliver his report. "We have identified the faction within the Syndicate responsible for the assassination attempt. They call themselves the Seven Stars Cult, led by a figure known as the Death Priest." "The Death Priest," Cirilla repeated, the name sending a chill through her. "What do we know of this individual?" "Very little. I'm afraid they operate in shadows, using religious fanaticism to inspire loyalty among their followers. The assassin we encountered was merely a pawn. The Death Priest himself is said to wield a staff of immense power, capable of channeling destructive plasma energy. Cyrilla paced the length of her chamber, considering this new information. And their ultimate goal? The complete destruction of the Zolorian monarchy. Your Majesty, they believe our traditions stand in the way of what they call cosmic evolution. They seek to replace our rule with their own twisted theology. Then we must strike first, Kurilla decided. Gather the War Council, and, she hesitated, inform James Carson when he is recovered. His insight into unconventional warfare may prove valuable. Sir Azor's ears twitched in surprise. You would include the human in our highest strategic discussions? He has earned that right, Cyrilla replied firmly. And I believe he can be trusted. The captain of the guard bowed again, though not before Cyrilla caught a glimpse of doubt in his eyes. As you command, Your Majesty. A week later, Jimmy was sufficiently recovered to attend the War Council. The wound on his shoulder had healed remarkably well, thanks to Zolorian medical technology, though it left a silvery scar that occasionally shimmered with residual plasma energy. The War Council was held in a secure chamber, deep within the crystalline flagship. Present were Queen Cyrilla, Sir Azor, Commander Karma, who still regarded Jimmy with suspicion, Elder Kirol, and several other high-ranking military and political figures. Jimmy felt distinctly out of place in the ornate chamber, especially since he had insisted on wearing his repaired Earth mercenary gear, rather than the Zolorian uniform they had offered him. Betsy, his plasma cannon, was holstered at his side, a concession he had demanded and, surprisingly, been granted. Our intelligence suggests the Seven Stars cult is planning a major offensive, Sir Azor began, activating a holographic display of the Zolorian system. They have amassed a significant fleet here, in the shadow of Zoloria's third moon. Classic hiding spot, Jimmy commented, earning several irritated glances. Sorry, continue. Their forces are being led personally by the Death Priest, Sir Azor continued. Our analysts believe they intend to launch a direct assault on the royal palace within the next planetary rotation. Commander Karma stepped forward. We should evacuate Your Majesty to the secure facility on our fourth moon. The palace defense systems can be operated remotely while our fleet engages the enemy. Running and hiding is not the Zolorian way, Elder Kirol objected. Our queen must stand firm to show strength to our people. With respect, Jimmy interjected, both approaches miss the point. The Syndicate expects either a fortress defense or a royal evacuation. What if we did neither? All eyes turned to him, some curious, others skeptical. Explain, Earthman, Cyrilla commanded, though her tone lacked its usual sharpness when addressing him. Instead of waiting for them to attack or running away, we set a trap, Jimmy proposed. Make it look like you're evacuating, Your Majesty, but actually prepare an ambush. The Syndicate wants you dead more than anything. They'll commit fully to that objective, potentially exposing this Death Priest character. A murmur ran through the council. It was an unconventional strategy, but it had merit. You would use our queen as bait, Commander Karma asked incredulously. This is precisely the reckless thinking we feared from humans. Not as bait, Jimmy corrected. As the decisive factor. Your Majesty is a skilled warrior. I've seen that firsthand. Let the enemy think they're attacking a fleeing monarch, only to find themselves face to face with the full might of Zoloria, led by their queen. Cyrilla considered the proposal thoughtfully. The strategy has merit. We have been reactive for too long. It is time we seize the initiative. Your Majesty, Elder Kirol cautioned, such a plan places you at considerable risk. The life debt notwithstanding. Can we truly trust this human's judgment in matters of royal security? Jimmy met the elder's gaze steadily. I've taken Plasma Blast for her 3 times now. I'm not exactly eager to make it 4, but I'll stand between her and danger again if I have to. And that, Kurilla said with finality, is precisely why I approve this plan. Sir Azor, begin preparations immediately. Commander Karma, coordinate our fleet movements to support the ambush. Elder Kirol, ensure the Royal Guard is ready. As for you, Royal Knight Carson, she addressed Jimmy with his new title. You will remain at my side throughout the operation. The War Council dispersed to implement the plan, leaving Jimmy and Cyrilla alone in the chamber. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of the coming confrontation hanging between them. This Death Priest, Jimmy finally said. He sounds like a real piece of work. The Seven Stars cult has existed in the shadows of our society for centuries, Kurilla explained, her voice softer than usual. They worship death and destruction, believing that only through cosmic chaos can true evolution occur. Their leader has always been called the Death Priest, though the title has passed from one fanatic to another through the generations. Jimmy nodded thoughtfully. On Earth, we have our share of death cults too. They tend to attract the desperate and the disillusioned. Yes, Cyrilla agreed, surprising him with her candor. The Syndicate has exploited the suffering caused by generations of war, offering simple answers to complex problems. They promise power to the powerless, revenge to the wronged. And what does Zaloria offer instead? Jimmy asked. Cyrilla turned to look at him fully, her violet blue eyes intense. Tradition, stability, honor, values that have sustained us through millennia of challenges. No offense, Your Majesty, but those values almost got you killed 3 times now. Instead of the anger he expected, Cyrilla's lips curved in the faintest suggestion of a smile. Perhaps it is time for some of our traditions to evolve. James Carson, after all, never before has a human held the title of Royal Knight. The plan was set in motion the following day. Word was deliberately leaked that Queen Cyrilla would be evacuated to the secure moon facility aboard a royal transport vessel. In reality, the transport contained a contingent of elite royal guards, while Cyrilla remained aboard the Crystalline, which had been disguised to appear as a standard military cruiser. Jimmy, now officially serving as the Queen's personal bodyguard, remained constantly at her side. He had been permitted to modify his Zalorian armor to better accommodate his human physiology and fighting style, resulting in a hybrid suit that combined Zalorian protection with Earth mobility. You look almost Zalorian, Cyrilla commented, as they prepared in the royal armory. Except for the ears, of course. Jimmy grinned, adjusting the plasma shield generator on his forearm. Don't worry, Your Majesty. I'm still the same irreverent human underneath all this fancy metal. I would expect nothing less, she replied. And Jimmy could have sworn he detected amusement in her tone. The trap was sprung when the Syndicate fleet, as predicted, attempted to intercept the royal transport. While their main forces were occupied with what they believed to be the Queen's escape vessel, a smaller, more sinister ship detached from the Syndicate armada and approached the disguised Crystalline. Death Priest's vessel identified, Sir Azor reported from the tactical station. They're attempting to dock at the maintenance airlock on the lower deck. As we anticipated, Cyrilla nodded, her battle armor fully secured. Knight Carson, are you ready? Jimmy checked Betsy one last time, ensuring the plasma chamber was fully charged. Ready as I'll ever be, Your Majesty, though I still think you should be somewhere safer. A Zalorian queen leads from the front, Kurilla stated firmly. Especially one who has accumulated such an unprecedented life debt. They moved to intercept the boarding party, accompanied by Sir Azor and a select group of royal guards. The maintenance deck was dimly lit, emergency protocols having rerouted power to defensive systems. The hiss of the airlock being forcibly opened echoed through the corridor. Remember, Jimmy whispered as they took up positions. This Death Priest is likely to have abilities we haven't encountered before. Don't take any unnecessary risks. I believe that is my line. Knight Carson, Kerala replied softly. Try not to accumulate any more life debt on my account. The airlock door burst open in a shower of sparks, and syndicate troops poured through, firing indiscriminately. The royal guards engaged them immediately, plasma weapons creating a dazzling light show in the confined space. And then, striding calmly through the chaos, came the Death Priest. Tall, even for a Zalorian, clad in armor that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it, a spiked helmet concealing most of their features. In one hand, they carried the rumored staff, a twisted rod of some unknown material that pulsed with purple plasma energy. Queen Cirilla Zaloria, the Death Priest's voice rasped, somehow cutting through the din of battle. Your dynasty ends today, along with your outdated traditions. You'll find our traditions have teeth, heretic, Cirilla replied, stepping forward with her royal blade ignited. The Death Priest laughed, a hollow, chilling sound. You cling to the past while the universe moves forward. Your life debt tradition is particularly pathetic, binding others to you out of obligation, rather than true loyalty. Jimmy felt a surge of anger at these words. Hey, cult boy, he shouted, drawing the Death Priest's attention. Maybe learn what loyalty actually means before trash-talking it. He fired Betsy, the blue plasma bolt streaking toward the Death Priest, who deflected it with a casual wave of their staff. The redirected energy scorched the ceiling, sending sparks raining down. A human defender? The Death Priest seemed genuinely surprised. How far the mighty Zalorians have fallen to rely on lesser beings. This lesser being has saved her life 3 times, Jimmy retorted, firing again. What have you done lately besides monologue in spooky armor? The Death Priest gestured, and a wave of purple energy erupted from the staff, forcing everyone to take cover. Sir Azor and his guards continued engaging the syndicate troops, while Jimmy and Cirilla focused on the Death Priest. His staff is the source of his power, Cirilla called to Jimmy as they dodged another energy blast. If we can separate him from it. On it, Jimmy replied, adjusting Betsy's settings to maximum dispersion. He fired at the deck beneath the Death Priest's feet, creating a localizing explosion that staggered their opponent. Cirilla seized the opportunity, lunging forward with incredible speed. Her royal blade clashed with the Death Priest's staff, plasma against plasma, creating a shower of energy that illuminated their faces in stark relief. Your line is finished, Zaloria, the Death Priest hissed. The 7 stars will rise, and with them, a new order. The only thing rising today, Cirilla countered, pushing back with surprising strength, is your defeat. The duel intensified. Cirilla's elegant swordsmanship against the Death Priest's more brutal, power-focused style. Jimmy circled around, looking for an opening. But the 2 combatants were moving too quickly for him to risk a shot. Then disaster struck. The Death Priest fainted, causing Cirilla to overextend, and with a vicious sweep of his staff, knocked her blade from her hand. Before she could recover, the purple plasma edge of the staff was at her throat. The end of an era, the Death Priest gloated. Any last words before you join your ancestors, last Queen of Zaloria? Yeah, Jimmy's voice came from behind him. Look behind you, classic mistake. The Death Priest half turned, just in time to see Jimmy fire Betsy directly at his back. The plasma bolt struck with devastating force, piercing through the light-absorbing armor and exiting through the chest. The staff fell from suddenly lifeless fingers, clattering to the deck as its purple glow faded. For a moment, silence reigned on the maintenance deck. The remaining syndicate troops, seeing their leader fall, quickly surrendered to Sir Azor's forces. Cirilla stared at the fallen Death Priest, then at Jimmy, who was lowering his weapon with a grim expression. That makes 4 times, I think, Jimmy said quietly, though I'm losing count. Cirilla approached him slowly, her royal composure momentarily abandoned. You killed the Death Priest. No one has ever... The 7 Stars cult has always escaped justice before. Jimmy shrugged, wincing slightly at the movement. "Just doing my job as Royal Knight, Your Majesty. Though I'm starting to think this life debt thing is becoming a habit." For the first time, Jimmy saw Queen Cyrilla Zaloria smile, a genuine expression that transformed her regal features into something almost warm. "Perhaps it is, James Carson. Perhaps it is." The victory over the Death Priest and the thwarting of the Syndicate's assassination attempt became a turning point in the war. With their religious leader dead and their strategy exposed, the Syndicate forces fell into disarray, allowing the combined Zalorian and Earth forces to push them back on multiple fronts. Jimmy's recovery from his latest injury was quicker this time. Zalorian medical technology, having adapted to his human physiology. Nurse Tellen informed him that traces of the silver fire net remained in his system, accelerating his natural healing process. "You're becoming part Zalorian," she teased, as she removed the final bandages. "Soon, you'll grow elongated ears and develop a taste for crystal nectar." "God forbid," Jimmy laughed. "Though I will say, that royal wine at dinner last night wasn't half bad." His status aboard the Crystalline had changed dramatically. Where once the Zalorian crew had regarded him with suspicion or outright hostility, now they nodded respectfully when he passed. Some even sought him out to learn more about Earth fighting techniques or human culture. Even Commander Karma, who had been one of his most vocal critics, grudgingly acknowledged his contribution. "Your unorthodox tactics have proven effective," she admitted during a training session with the Royal Guards. "Though I still maintain that proper discipline would make you even more formidable." "Maybe," Jimmy conceded. "But then I wouldn't be me anymore, would I?" The most significant change, however, was in his relationship with Queen Cyrilla. Their interactions, once stiffly formal, had evolved into something approaching companionship. She had begun to seek his counsel on matters beyond security, valuing his outsider perspective on Zalorian politics and traditions. One evening, she summoned him to the Royal Observation Deck, a crystal dome that offered an unobstructed view of the stars. Zaloria's twin moons hung like silver pendants against the velvet black of space, casting a peaceful glow over the flagship. Jimmy found the Queen alone, dressed in simpler attire than usual, still regal, but less ceremonial. She was gazing out at the distant stars, her profile etched in moonlight. "You wanted to see me, Your Majesty?" Jimmy asked, announcing his presence. Cyrilla turned, her violet blue eyes reflecting the starlight. "James, thank you for coming." The use of his first name without his title startled him. "Is everything all right?" "Yes and no," she replied enigmatically. "The war progresses in our favor, but I find myself troubled." Jimmy moved to stand beside her at the viewport. "About what?" "The life debt," she said after a moment's hesitation. "It has become something unprecedented. 4 times now. You have saved me. In our entire history, no monarch has ever accumulated such a debt to a single individual. Certainly, not to someone from another world." "If it makes you feel better, I wasn't keeping score," Jimmy offered with a slight smile. "But our traditions demand accounting," Cyrilla sighed. "The council is divided. Some, like Elder Kirol, believe the debt has become too great, that it threatens the independence of the throne. Others, like Sir Azor, argue that it represents a new kind of bond between our worlds." "And what do you believe?" Jimmy asked quietly. Cyrilla turned to face him fully. "I believe that traditions must serve the living, not the other way around. The life debt was meant to honor sacrifice and ensure loyalty. Your actions have fulfilled its spirit many times over. So, what are you saying? Am I free to go back to Earth when this war is over?" A strange expression crossed Cyrilla's face, something almost like disappointment. "Is that what you wish?" Jimmy hesitated, surprised by his own reluctance. When had Zaloria, with its strange customs and formal manners, begun to feel like somewhere he belonged? "I don't know," he admitted honestly. A few weeks ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Now, I'm not so sure. I've made connections here. People I'd miss. Like Nurse Tellen? Cyrilla asked, her tone suddenly cool. Jimmy couldn't help but laugh. Tellen's been kind to me, sure, but she's not who I was thinking of. The Queen's ears twitched slightly. A reaction Jimmy had learned indicated heightened emotion, though whether positive or negative was hard to tell. The Grand Victory Parade is scheduled for tomorrow, she said, changing the subject. As Royal Knight, you will ride at my side. The people should see the face of the human who helped defeat the Death Priest. I'm not much for parades, Jimmy admitted. All that pomp and circumstance makes me itchy. A hint of the old imperious Cyrilla returned. It is not a request, Knight Carson. The alliance between our worlds must be visibly strengthened. Your presence is essential. Jimmy sighed dramatically. As you command, Your Majesty. But don't blame me if I fall off whatever exotic Zalorian mount you assign me. You will be provided with a royal white steed, Cyrilla informed him, the corner of her mouth twitching suspiciously. They are known for their spirited temperament. Great, Jimmy muttered. Just great. The Grand Victory Parade exceeded even Jimmy's pessimistic expectations in terms of pageantry. The Crystalline had returned to Zaloria's surface, docking at the Royal Spaceport, adjacent to the capital city. From there, a procession of Zalorian nobility, military officers, and honored Earth representatives wound its way through streets lined with cheering civilians. Jimmy, true to Cyrilla's word, had been assigned a royal white steed, a creature that resembled a horse only in the broadest sense, with 6 legs, iridescent scales instead of hair, and a decidedly bad attitude. He clung to the ornate saddle, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity, while the beast pranced and snorted beneath him. Ahead rode Queen Cyrilla on her own mount, a magnificent beast with scales that matched her royal armor. She looked every inch the victorious monarch, acknowledging the adoration of her people with regal nods. Smile, human, Sir Azor advised from his own steed alongside Jimmy. This is as much your victory as ours. Easy for you to say, Jimmy grumbled. Your mount isn't trying to buck you into next week. Sir Azor's ears twitched in amusement. The royal white steeds are excellent judges of character. They respond to confidence and calm. Perhaps try speaking to it gently. Jimmy gave the knight a skeptical look, but leaned forward to murmur to his mount. Listen, buddy, we're both stuck in this parade. So how about we call a truce? You stop trying to throw me off, and I'll make sure you get extra whatever it is you eat later. To his surprise, the creature's erratic movements smoothed out into a more dignified gait, earning an impressed look from Sir Azor. You continue to surprise me, James Carson. The parade culminated at the Grand Plaza before the Royal Palace, where a massive crowd had gathered to hear Queen Cyrilla speak. Jimmy and the other honored warriors were positioned on the steps behind her as she addressed her people. Citizens of Zaloria, her voice carried across the hushed plaza. Today we celebrate not just a military victory, but a new chapter in our history. The defeat of the Death Priest and the weakening of the Syndicate marked the beginning of a true alliance between Zaloria and Earth. Cheers erupted, though Jimmy noticed they were more enthusiastic in some sections of the crowd than others. Not everyone was convinced, it seemed. For generations, we have held to our traditions, including the sacred life debt. Today, I stand before you having received an unprecedented debt from Royal Knight James Carson of Earth, who has 4 times placed himself between royal blood and death. The crowd murmured in amazement. 4 life debts was indeed unheard of. Such a debt cannot be repaid in the traditional manner, Cyrilla continued. And so, by royal decree, I establish a new tradition. James Carson is hereby elevated to the rank of royal heir, with all the honors and responsibilities that entails. Jimmy nearly fell off his newly cooperative steed. Royal heir? That was definitely not part of their discussion. He caught Sir Azor's equally shocked expression, while Elder Kirill looked as though he might collapse from apoplexy. Furthermore, Karila raised her voice over the growing murmurs. This elevation symbolizes the bond between our worlds. No longer shall Earth be viewed as a distant ally, but as a sister world to Zaloria, united in purpose and destiny. The plaza erupted in a mixture of cheers, applause, and confused murmuring. Jimmy remained frozen in place, trying to process what had just happened. Had the Queen just made him some kind of Zalorian prince? As the ceremony concluded and the royal party retreated into the palace, Jimmy finally managed to get Cirilla alone in an antechamber. "Your Majesty," he began, struggling to keep his voice level. "What exactly does royal heir mean? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds an awful lot like you just adopted me." Cirilla's expression remained composed, though there was a glint of something like mischief in her eyes. "Not adoption, precisely. In Zalorian tradition, a royal heir is one who carries the future of the monarchy. Typically, it refers to a blood descendant, but in extraordinary circumstances, it can be bestowed upon one who has proven themselves worthy through actions rather than birth." "So, what? I'm in line for the throne now?" Jimmy asked incredulously. "Third in line, to be precise," Cirilla clarified. "After my siblings, who are currently serving as regents in our colony worlds." Jimmy ran a hand over his face. "This is insane. I'm a mercenary, not a prince. I don't know the first thing about ruling a planet, which is why you will undergo extensive training in Zalorian law, history, and governance," Cirilla informed him with what was definitely amusement now. "Beginning tomorrow." "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Jimmy accused. For the first time, Cirilla laughed openly, a musical sound that transformed her usually serious face. "Perhaps a little. The expression on Elder Kirill's face alone was worth it." Jimmy couldn't help but laugh as well. "Okay, I'll give you that." The old guy looked like he'd swallowed a plasma grenade. Their shared laughter eased some of the tension between them, creating a moment of genuine connection that transcended their formal roles. "In all seriousness, James," Karilla said when their mirth had subsided, "this appointment serves multiple purposes. It secures your position against those who would challenge the life debt. It strengthens our alliance with Earth, and it provides a clear message to any remaining syndicate forces that Zaloria and humanity stand united." Jimmy nodded slowly, beginning to understand the political calculations behind her decision. "And what about you? Where do you stand in all this?" Cirilla hesitated, something vulnerable flickering behind her regal mask. "I stand as queen first, as I must, but also as one who has come to value your counsel, your courage, and your companionship." Before Jimmy could respond to this unexpected admission, Sir Azor entered the antechamber with a bow. "Your Majesty, the Earth Ambassador requests an immediate audience regarding the royal heir announcement." Cirilla nodded, her formal demeanor returning instantly. "I will receive him in the throne room. Knight Carson, you should join us. Your perspective will be valuable." And just like that, the moment was gone, replaced by the demands of governance and diplomacy. Jimmy followed Cirilla toward the throne room, still trying to process everything that had happened, both politically and personally. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. As royal heir, Jimmy was thrust into a crash course on Zalorian culture, politics, and protocol. His days were filled with lessons from stern-faced tutors who clearly doubted his ability to absorb centuries of tradition. His evenings were occupied with strategic planning sessions as the combined Earth-Zalorian forces continued to press their advantage against the weakened syndicate. To everyone's surprise, including his own, Jimmy proved to be an apt student. His years as a mercenary had taught him to adapt quickly to new environments and cultures, and he approached his studies with the same intensity he brought to the battlefield. "You have a natural talent for strategic thinking," Elder Kirill admitted grudgingly one day, after Jimmy had successfully completed a complex simulation of Zalorian political negotiations. "Though your methods remain unorthodox." "I'll take that as a compliment," Jimmy replied with a grin. "Unorthodox seems to be working so far." Not all aspects of Zalorian life came easily to him. However, the elaborate court etiquette, with its hundreds of specific gestures and phrases, remained a constant source of frustration. More than once, he inadvertently caused offense by using the wrong honorific or making an inappropriate ear gesture. "You must curve your fingers thus," Karila demonstrated during one particularly trying lesson in royal protocol. "It indicates respect for the elder's lineage while acknowledging your own status." Jimmy attempted to mimic the gesture, his human fingers lacking the flexibility of Zalorian digits. "This would be a lot easier if you all just used handshakes like normal, like Earth people." Cyrilla's ears twitched in what he now recognized as amusement. "And miss watching you struggle? Never." These moments of levity between them had become more frequent as the formal barriers gradually eroded. Though Cyrilla maintained her queenly dignity in public, in private, she had begun to reveal glimpses of the person behind the crown, intelligent, determined, and possessed of a dry wit that matched Jimmy's own. For his part, Jimmy found himself increasingly drawn to this complex woman who balanced the weight of an ancient civilization on her shoulders with such grace. Their relationship defied easy categorization, more than ruler and subject, different from commander and soldier, not quite friends in the conventional sense, yet bound by something deeper than any of these. The life debt, once a burden, had evolved into something else entirely, a connection that neither of them fully understood, but both had come to value. This evolution was not lost on those around them. Sir Azor, who had become something of a mentor to Jimmy in matters of Zalorian warfare, observed the changing dynamic with thoughtful concern. "The Queen has never shown such familiarity with anyone outside the royal family," he remarked during a training session. "It has not gone unnoticed by the court." "Is that a problem?" Jimmy asked, parrying Sir Azor's plasma blade with his own newly acquired weapon. The knight hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It could be. There are traditions regarding royal attachments, just as there are for everything in our society. The life debt complicates matters further." "Everything about this situation is complicated," Jimmy sighed, lowering his weapon. "Sometimes, I think it would have been simpler if I'd just let that first assassin stab her." Sir Azor's ears flattened in alarm. "That is not humorous, even by human standards." "Sorry," Jimmy apologized. "Earth joke. Dark humor is how we cope with stress." "I see," Sir Azor replied, though his expression suggested he didn't. "In any case, I would advise caution. The Queen's position is more precarious than she often acknowledges. Despite your elevation to royal heir, there are those who consider her growing closeness to you a sign of weakness or foreign influence." Jimmy frowned. "Who specifically?" "Elder Kirill has been meeting privately with several provincial governors. Commander Karma has expressed concerns about the integration of Earth forces into our military structure. And there are whispers that not all members of the Seven Stars cult died with their priest." This information troubled Jimmy deeply. Despite the outward victory celebrations, it seemed the internal threats to Cyrilla's rule, and by extension, to the alliance with Earth, remained substantial. His concerns were confirmed later that day when Nurse Tellen sought him out urgently. "Royal heir," she addressed him formally, though her familiar use of his first name followed immediately. "James, I've overheard something you should know." Jimmy pulled her into a quiet alcove, away from the busy corridor. "What is it?" Two of Elder Kirill's aides were discussing plans for the celestial alignment ceremony next week, she explained, in a hushed voice. They mentioned something about restoring proper order and cleansing foreign influence from the throne. The celestial alignment was a major Zalorian religious event, occurring once every 60 years when Zaloria's twin moons aligned perfectly with the planet's sun. Queen Cirilla was scheduled to perform ancient rites at the Temple of Eternal Stars, surrounded by the nobility and religious leaders. Did they mention specific plans? Jimmy pressed. Any details at all? Tellen shook her head. They spoke in vague terms, but their intent seemed clear. They view the ceremony as an opportunity. Jimmy thanked her for the information and immediately sought out Sir Azor, who listened to his concerns with grave attention. The celestial alignment is sacred, the knight explained. Security will be minimal inside the temple itself, as weapons are forbidden in the sacred space. If someone were planning to move against the queen, it would be the perfect opportunity, Jimmy finished grimly. We need to speak with Cirilla immediately. They found the queen in her study, reviewing reports from the ongoing military campaign against syndicate remnants. She listened to their concerns without interruption, her expression remaining neutral. You believe Elder Kirill is planning a coup, she summarized when they had finished. Or an assassination, Jimmy added bluntly. Either way, the ceremony is too risky. You should postpone it, or conduct it remotely. Cirilla shook her head firmly. The celestial alignment occurs only once every 60 years. For the monarch to abstain from the traditional rites would be seen as a terrible omen. It would undermine confidence in my rule more effectively than any plot Kirill might devise. Then let me attend with you, Jimmy insisted. Traditions be damned. That is impossible, Sir Azor interjected. Only those of royal or priestly blood may enter the inner sanctum during the alignment. Even I, as captain of the royal guard, must remain in the outer chamber. So you'll just walk in there defenseless? Jimmy demanded, frustration evident in his voice. After everything we've been through? Cirilla rose from her desk, approaching Jimmy with measured steps. I am never defenseless. James, I have been trained in combat since childhood, and more importantly, I will not be ruled by fear. If Kirill or others are indeed plotting against me, showing weakness will only encourage them. Jimmy recognized the steel in her voice. This was not just Cirilla speaking, but the Queen of Zaloria, a ruler who had survived years of war and multiple assassination attempts. Still, the thought of her facing danger without him to intervene set his teeth on edge. There must be a compromise, he insisted. Some way to maintain tradition while ensuring your safety. Cirilla considered for a moment. The royal heir traditionally waits in the chamber of reflection, adjacent to the inner sanctum. While you cannot enter the sacred space itself, you would be nearby should complications arise. Sir Azor nodded slowly. It is unusual for a newly appointed heir to participate in the ceremony, but not unprecedented. And given the unique circumstances of his appointment, then it's settled, Cirilla declared. Sir Azor will command the temple's exterior security. James will accompany me as far as tradition allows, and we will all remain vigilant for any sign of treachery. As they left the Queen's study to begin preparations, Sir Azor placed a hand on Jimmy's shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie he rarely displayed. You have good instincts, Earthman, the knight acknowledged. The Queen values this about you, even when she seems to dismiss your concerns. She's the most stubborn person I've ever met, Jimmy complained, human or Zalorian. Sir Azor's ears twitched in what might have been amusement. It is what makes her a great queen, and perhaps why you two understand each other so well, despite your differences. You share a certain headstrong quality. Jimmy couldn't argue with that assessment. His own stubborn streak had gotten him into, and occasionally out of, trouble throughout his life. It was partly what had driven him to become a mercenary in the first place, seeking freedom from authority and the ability to make his own decisions. Now, ironically, he found himself bound to the most significant authority figure on an entire planet. And stranger still, he found he didn't mind nearly as much as he would have expected. The day of the celestial alignment arrived with all the pomp and circumstance Zalorian tradition demanded. The capital city was transformed by decorations of crystal and light, designed to reflect and amplify the rare astronomical event. Citizens filled the streets, many having traveled from distant provinces to witness the sacred ceremony. The Temple of Eternal Stars stood at the highest point of the city, its ancient crystal spires reaching toward the sky like frozen flames. Built millennia ago, its architecture predated even the Zalorian monarchy. Its innermost chambers said to have been designed by beings who understood the cosmic energies of the universe in ways lost to modern science. Jimmy, dressed in formal attire that blended Zalorian style with subtle Earth influences, accompanied Queen Cirilla in the royal procession to the temple. He had managed to conceal a small plasma dagger within his ceremonial garments. Not Betsy, sadly, as the weapon was far too large to hide. But better than nothing if his suspicions proved correct. Cirilla was resplendent in traditional ceremonial robes of silver and sapphire, her crown catching the light of Zaloria's setting sun. To Jimmy's eyes, she had never looked more regal or more vulnerable. "Remember," she murmured as they approached the temple steps, where a delegation of priests awaited them. "Once we enter, you must proceed directly to the Chamber of Reflection. Do not attempt to enter the inner sanctum, no matter what occurs." "Unless you're in danger," Jimmy amended quietly. Cirilla's eyes flashed. The ceremony itself involves certain intense experiences. What you might perceive as danger could simply be part of the ancient rites. Trust that I know the difference. Before Jimmy could argue further, they were greeted by the high priest of the temple, an ancient Zalorian whose ears had grown so long they were ceremonially bound with silver chains. "Your Majesty," the priest intoned, bowing deeply, "the stars await your communion." The interior of the temple was a marvel of crystal engineering. Prisms and lenses were precisely arranged to capture and channel the light of the celestial alignment, creating patterns of luminescence that were said to reveal cosmic truths to those who knew how to interpret them. As promised, Jimmy was escorted to the Chamber of Reflection, a smaller room adjacent to the inner sanctum, where the actual ceremony would take place. Through a translucent crystal wall, he could vaguely make out the shapes of those gathered in the larger chamber, but details were obscured. "I must ask you to surrender any weapons," the acolyte who had led him to the chamber requested politely but firmly. Jimmy produced a ceremonial dagger that had been officially issued to him, not the concealed plasma blade he had hidden in a special compartment of his boot. "Just this," he lied smoothly. The acolyte accepted the decoy weapon with a bow and retreated, leaving Jimmy alone in the chamber. As soon as the door closed, he began a systematic inspection of the room, searching for any hidden entrances or surveillance devices. Finding none, he positioned himself where he had the clearest view of the inner sanctum through the crystal partition. The ceremony began as the twin moons became visible through the temple's central oculus. Priests and priestesses formed a circle around Queen Cirilla, who stood upon a raised dais at the center of the chamber. Elder Kirill was present, along with other high-ranking nobles and religious figures. But from Jimmy's position, it was difficult to discern their expressions or movements. As the moons aligned with the setting sun, beams of combined light streamed through the oculus, refracted and amplified by the crystal architecture into a dazzling display that bathed the inner sanctum in otherworldly radiance. The chanting of the priests grew more intense, and Jimmy saw Cirilla raise her arms in what appeared to be part of the ritual. Then, just as the alignment reached its apex, Jimmy noticed movement from the temple's shadow, a figure detaching itself from the darkness behind the assembled dignitaries. The shape was wrong for a Zalorian, too bulky and angular. "Syndicate combat droid," Jimmy breathed, instantly alert. How had it infiltrated the sacred space? Unless... He scanned the room again and spotted Elder Kirol, whose hands were moving in a pattern that didn't match the ritual gestures of the others. A control sequence, perhaps? Without hesitation, Jimmy retrieved his hidden plasma dagger and pressed it against the crystal partition. The weapon, designed to cut through starship hull material, made quick work of the ancient crystal. He stepped through the opening, just as the combat droid lunged toward the dais, where Cirilla stood, momentarily blinded by the intense light of the alignment. "Assassin!" Jimmy shouted, drawing all eyes to him as he sprinted across the sacred space, a violation of tradition that would have been scandalous under any other circumstances. The combat droid, its cover blown, abandoned subtlety. Its arms transformed into serrated plasma blades as it charged directly at Queen Cirilla, who was still completing the sacred ritual and couldn't break away without potentially catastrophic spiritual consequences, according to Zalorian belief. Jimmy intercepted the droid just before it reached her, his small plasma dagger seeming pathetically inadequate against the machine's weaponry. Nevertheless, he managed to deflect its first strike, the impact sending shockwaves of pain up his arm. "Your Majesty," he called out. "A little help would be appreciated." Cirilla, to her credit, maintained her ritual position but kicked a ceremonial staff toward him, not a weapon per se, but better than facing the droid with only a dagger. Jimmy snatched it up with his free hand, using it to block the droid's second blade while striking with his dagger. The assembled priests and nobles had scattered in panic, all except Elder Kirol, who stood watching with an expression of calculating interest. When he saw Jimmy looking at him, the elder's face hardened, and he reached into his robes. "Sir Azor!" Jimmy shouted toward the chamber entrance. "Kirol is controlling the droid!" The doors burst open as the captain of the Royal Guard and his soldiers rushed in, tradition forgotten in the face of clear danger. Sir Azor's gaze locked onto Elder Kirol, who had produced a small control device. "Arrest the traitor!" Sir Azor commanded, his troops moving to surround Kirol. The distraction cost Jimmy dearly. The combat droid, executing its primary directive regardless of its controller's fate, slashed downward with both blades. Jimmy managed to block one with the ceremonial staff, but the other cut deeply across his chest, burning through his formal attire and into flesh. Pain exploded through his body, but he refused to falter. With the last of his strength, he drove his plasma dagger up into the droid's central processor, located in what would be the throat on a biological being. The machine shuddered, its systems failing, and collapsed in a heap of sparking metal. Jimmy fell to his knees, blood soaking through his torn clothing. Through a haze of pain, he was vaguely aware of Cirilla completing the final gesture of the ritual before rushing to his side. "James!" Her voice seemed distant despite her proximity. "Medical team, immediately!" "Did I interrupt your ceremony?" Jimmy managed to ask, his voice weak, but still carrying a hint of his characteristic humor. "You fool!" Cirilla chided, though her tone held no real anger. "You promised to stay in the Chamber of Reflection." "Technically," Jimmy coughed, "I promised to stay there unless you were in danger, which you were. So I kept my promise. Sort of." Around them, chaos reigned. Sir Azor's guards had subdued Elder Kirol, who was ranting about the purity of Zalorian rule and the corruption of foreign influence. Priests and priestesses were torn between continuing the sacred rituals and attending to the wounded human who had defiled their inner sanctum to save their queen. "The alignment," Jimmy remembered suddenly. "Did you finish the ceremony?" Cirilla nodded, her hands pressing against his wound to slow the bleeding. "I completed the final invocation just as you engaged the droid. The cosmic energies have been balanced for another 60 years. "Good," Jimmy mumbled, his consciousness beginning to fade. "Wouldn't want to get stabbed for nothing." His world went dark to the sound of Cirilla calling his name, with uncharacteristic panic in her voice. Jimmy awoke once again in the familiar surroundings of the Royal Medical Bay, though this time it was located within the palace, rather than aboard the Crystalline. The silver fire net hummed above him, its glowing tendrils working to repair the significant damage to his chest. 5 times now, came Cirilla's voice from beside his bed. You have placed yourself between me and death 5 times. James Carson. Jimmy turned his head slightly to see her sitting in a chair next to him, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Her ceremonial robes had been replaced by simpler attire, and there were dark circles beneath her violet-blue eyes, suggesting she had not slept. "Are you keeping score?" he asked weakly. "Because I'm pretty sure I'm winning." Cirilla did not smile at his attempt at humor. The wound was severe. The droid's blade was coated with a toxin designed to counter our medical technology. If not for Nurse Tellen's quick thinking in modifying the Silver Firenet protocols. She left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. Jimmy had come closer to death this time than ever before. "Kirol," he asked, changing the subject. "Under arrest, along with several co-conspirators. His trial will begin once you are recovered enough to testify." Cirilla's expression hardened. "His betrayal runs deeper than we initially thought. He has been in contact with Syndicate remnants for years, feeding them information and undermining our defenses." "And the ceremony? Any cosmic disasters I should know about after I barged in uninvited?" At this, Cirilla's expression softened slightly. "The priests were upset, but even they cannot deny that your intervention saved both my life and, potentially, the ceremony itself. Had I been killed before completing the final invocation, the consequences would have been far worse than a brief interruption. So I'm not going to be smited by angry star gods? That's a relief." "Smote is the term, I believe," Cirilla corrected with the faintest hint of amusement. "And no, cosmic retribution is unlikely. Though I cannot promise the High Priest won't glare at you for the next several decades." Jimmy attempted to sit up but was gently restrained by the medical field. "Small price to pay for saving a queen. Speaking of which, this life debt thing is getting ridiculous. At what point do we call it even?" Cirilla was quiet for a long moment, her gaze shifting to the window, where Zaloria's twin moons were visible in the night sky. "The traditional life debt is a sacred bond, but it was never meant to account for what has happened between us. You have saved my life not once, but 5 times. You have killed the Death Priest, exposed a traitor in my council, and helped secure an alliance that may save both our worlds." She returned her gaze to him, something unreadable in her expression. "Such debts cannot be repaid through traditional means. They have become something else entirely." "What does that mean, exactly?" Jimmy asked, suddenly aware of a tension in the air that had nothing to do with his injuries. "It means," Cirilla said slowly, "that I am no longer certain who owes what to whom. You have given your blood for Zaloria repeatedly. In turn, we have bound you to our world against your will, demanded your service, and nearly caused your death multiple times." She leaned forward, taking his hand in a gesture that would have been scandalously informal for a Zalorian queen under normal circumstances. "Perhaps it is I who now owe you a debt, James Carson, not as a queen to a subject, but as one being to another." The admission seemed to cost her something, a small piece of the royal composure she had maintained her entire life. For the first time, Jimmy saw not just the Queen of Zaloria, but Cirilla herself, a woman bearing the weight of an ancient civilization, who had never been permitted the luxury of personal feelings or desires. "Maybe we could just start over," Jimmy suggested quietly. "No debts, no obligations, just 2 people who've been through hell together and come out the other side." Cirilla's ears twitched in what he now recognized as surprise. "Is such a thing possible? To simply Disregard all that has happened. Not disregard, Jimmy clarified. Honor it, remember it, but not let it define everything that comes after, on Earth. We have this saying, wipe the slate clean, start fresh. A clean slate, Cirilla repeated thoughtfully. It is an appealing concept, if somewhat foreign to Zalorian thinking. We tend to carry our histories with us, for better or worse. Yeah, well, maybe that's part of your problem. All this tradition and history weighing you down, making it hard to move forward. Jimmy winced as a spasm of pain shot through his chest. Not that Earth has all the answers either. We tend to forget our history too easily, repeat the same mistakes. Maybe there's a middle ground. Cirilla's expression softened as she considered his words. A middle ground between remembering and releasing, between tradition and innovation. Her hand remained on his, a small but significant breach of royal protocol. I find myself increasingly drawn to such middle grounds since you arrived, James Carson. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Nurse Tellen, who entered to check Jimmy's vitals and adjust the silver fire net. Your Majesty, she greeted the Queen with surprise. I did not expect to find you here at this hour. I was ensuring our royal heir's recovery progresses well, Cirilla replied smoothly, withdrawing her hand from Jimmy's and resuming her regal posture. The upcoming trial of Elder Kirill will require his testimony. Nurse Tellen's knowing look suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by this explanation, but she was too professional to comment. His healing advances well, though he should remain under the net for at least another day. Wonderful, Jimmy muttered, another day staring at the ceiling. Just what I wanted. I can have educational materials brought in, Cirilla suggested with a hint of mischief. Perhaps volumes on Zalorian ceremonial etiquette? I'd rather take another plasma blade to the chest. This startled a laugh from both women, though Tellen quickly composed herself in the Queen's presence. I shall leave you to rest, Cirilla said, rising from her chair. We have much to discuss once you are recovered. Royal heir. The way she emphasized his title made Jimmy wonder exactly what she had in mind. But before he could ask, she had swept from the room, leaving him alone with Nurse Tellen and his thoughts. She has visited every day, Tellen informed him as she checked his bandages. Sometimes, multiple times. I have never seen her so concerned for anyone's welfare. We've been through a lot together, Jimmy said simply, unsure how else to characterize his complex relationship with the Queen. Indeed, Tellen agreed with a knowing smile. Rest now. You will need your strength for whatever comes next. What came next, as it turned out, was the trial of Elder Kirill and his co-conspirators, held in the Grand Justice Chamber of the Royal Palace. It was a solemn affair that attracted attention from across Zalorian society and even from Earth representatives. Jimmy, still weak but able to stand with assistance, provided testimony about the events at the temple. He described Elder Kirill's suspicious behavior and the combat droid's attack, careful to emphasize that he had violated sacred tradition only because the Queen's life was in imminent danger. Elder Kirill, stripped of his ceremonial robes and standing in the simple gray garment of an accused traitor, glared at Jimmy throughout his testimony. "The human lies," he shouted, when given the chance to speak. "He seeks to elevate himself by falsely accusing a true servant of Zaloria." "The evidence speaks otherwise," Commander Karma stated coldly. To Jimmy's surprise, she had been appointed chief prosecutor for the trial. "We have recovered the control device from your quarters, matching the frequency used to activate the combat droid. Furthermore, communications logs show regular encrypted transmissions between your personal console and known syndicate frequencies." The trial lasted 3 days, with numerous witnesses and evidence presented. Throughout the proceedings, Jimmy observed Queen Cirilla, who presided over the court with impassive dignity. Only someone who knew her well might notice the tension in her shoulders or the occasional twitch of her ears when particularly damning evidence was revealed. On the final day, the verdict was announced. Elder Kirol and his primary co-conspirators were found guilty of high treason, attempted regicide, and collaboration with enemy forces. The traditional punishment for such crimes was execution by plasma dissolution, a particularly gruesome fate that Jimmy found disturbing despite all he had seen in his mercenary career. To his surprise, Cirilla rose from her throne before the sentence was pronounced. "The evidence and the law are clear," she addressed the court. "The traditional punishment for these crimes is death. However, traditions must serve the living, not bind us to paths that no longer serve justice." A murmur ran through the assembly at this unprecedented statement. Elder Kirol has served the throne for 70 years before his betrayal, Cirilla continued. His knowledge of our history and governance, though twisted to his own ends, remains valuable. Therefore, I commute the death sentence to permanent exile to the reflection colonies on our outermost moon, where he will record a complete accounting of Zalorian governance for future generations. The pronouncement was met with mixed reactions: shock from traditionalists, approval from progressives, and thoughtful consideration from most. Jimmy, watching from his position near the throne, felt a surge of pride in Cirilla's decision. It was merciful without being weak, innovative while respecting the past. Elder Kirol himself seemed stunned, having clearly expected, and perhaps even desired, a martyr's death. "You deny me even the dignity of traditional punishment?" he spat. "This further proves your unfitness to rule, corrupted as you are by human influence." "On the contrary," Cirilla replied calmly. "It proves that the throne of Zaloria adapts and evolves, as it has for millennia. Your betrayal will not define our future, Elder. It will merely be a footnote in the greater story of our survival and renewal." With that, the guards led the disgraced elder away, and the court adjourned. As the chamber emptied, Cirilla beckoned Jimmy to follow her to a private antechamber. "Your ruling surprised them," Jimmy commented once they were alone. "Kirol was right about one thing. It wasn't traditional." "No," Cirilla agreed. "It was not. But neither is elevating a human to royal heir, or forming an alliance with Earth, or any number of decisions I have made since you crashed into my life with that first act of sacrifice." Jimmy leaned against the wall, still not fully recovered from his injuries. "Are you saying I'm a bad influence?" A smile touched Cirilla's lips. "I'm saying you have helped me see beyond the constraints of tradition to the principles that should truly guide us. Mercy can be stronger than vengeance. Innovation need not erase history. Different worlds can find common ground." "That's a lot of credit for a guy who just didn't want to see a queen get stabbed." Jimmy deflected, uncomfortable with the praise. "Is that truly all it was?" Cirilla asked, stepping closer to him. "Just instinct? Not choice?" Jimmy met her gaze, finding himself unable to maintain his usual irreverence in the face of her earnestness. "The first time? Maybe. After that? No. It was choice. Every time." "Why?" The question was simple but loaded with meaning. Jimmy hesitated, uncertain how to articulate feelings he himself didn't fully understand. "At first, because it was the right thing to do. Then because I respected what you stand for, even when I didn't understand all your traditions. And now—" He trailed off, the words catching in his throat. "And now?" Cirilla prompted gently. "Now I can't imagine standing anywhere but between you and danger," Jimmy admitted quietly. "Life debt or no life debt." The admission hung in the air between them, changing something fundamental in their relationship. Cirilla's ears twitched rapidly, betraying emotion that her face remained too disciplined to show. "The syndicate remnants are being pushed back on all fronts," she said after a moment, seemingly changing the subject. "Our alliance with Earth grows stronger each day. Soon, the immediate threat to Zaloria will be neutralized." "That's good news," Jimmy replied, uncertain where she was going with this. Indeed, and it raises the question of your future. Cyrilla's voice was carefully neutral. As royal heir, you have certain duties and privileges, but you also have choices that most Zolorians in your position would not.
Such as?
Such as whether to remain on Zoloria or return to Earth, whether to fully embrace your role in our society or maintain your identity as a human mercenary. She paused, then added softly, whether the bond between us is one of duty, friendship, or something else entirely. Jimmy's heart rate increased, and he noticed with embarrassment that the medical monitor still attached to his wrist began beeping slightly faster, betraying his physiological response to her words. "What would you prefer, Your Majesty?" he asked, for once addressing her formally, not out of protocol, but as a shield against the vulnerability of the moment. Cyrilla stepped even closer, close enough that he could see the subtle patterns in her violet-blue irises. "What I prefer is not the question, James. For the first time since I ascended to the throne, I find myself concerned with what I want, rather than what tradition or duty demands. It is an unfamiliar feeling." "Yeah, well, wanting things is pretty human," Jimmy said, attempting to lighten the suddenly intense atmosphere. "We're kind of famous for it." "Perhaps that is why your presence has been so disruptive to our ordered society," Cyrilla mused. "You bring with you this contagious desire for personal choice, for individual happiness alongside duty." "Is that a bad thing?" Jimmy asked. "I am no longer certain," Cyrilla admitted. "Once, I would have said yes without hesitation. Now—" Her ears twitched in what Jimmy had come to recognize as her equivalent of a shrug. They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Jimmy found himself at a crossroads he had never anticipated when he first took that mercenary contract to Zoloria. The path back to his old life seemed increasingly distant, while the future before him, complex, challenging, but filled with purpose, beckoned with unexpected allure. Before either could break the silence, Sir Azor entered after a perfunctory knock, his expression urgent. "Your Majesty, Royal Heir," he addressed them both. "We have received a priority communication from the Earth Fleet. They have engaged a previously unknown syndicate battle group near the outer system. They request immediate reinforcement." The moment shattered, duty once again taking precedence over personal matters. Cyrilla straightened, instantly transforming back into the monarch. "Prepare the royal fleet for immediate departure," she commanded. "Alert all military commanders. James," she turned to him, "are you well enough to join the War Council?" Jimmy nodded, pushing aside both physical discomfort and emotional complexity. "Always, Your Majesty." The following days were a blur of strategic planning and military coordination. The newly discovered syndicate forces were more substantial than anyone had anticipated, suggesting that the death of the Death Priest had not been the decisive blow they had hoped. Jimmy threw himself into the work, partly to distract himself from his unresolved conversation with Cyrilla, and partly because strategy had always been his strong suit. His background as a mercenary gave him insights into unconventional tactics that complemented the more traditional Zolorian military approach. "If we position our faster ships here," he indicated on the holographic display during one planning session, "we can create a diversion while the main fleet approaches from behind this moon. The Syndicate won't expect us to split our forces." Commander Karma, who had gradually warmed to Jimmy's presence, nodded in agreement. "The tactic has merit, high risk, but potentially high reward. The Earth vessels have superior maneuverability," Sir Azor added. "They would be ideal for the diversionary force." Queen Cyrilla, who had been quietly observing the discussion, made the final decision. "We will proceed with Royal Heir Carson's plan. Commander Karma will lead the main fleet, while Sir Azor coordinates with the Earth commanders for the diversionary attack." "And you, Your Majesty?" Jimmy asked, already suspecting her answer. "I will command the crystalline at the head of the main fleet," she stated, brooking no argument. As is tradition in times of significant conflict, Jimmy bit back his instinctive protest. He had learned enough about Zalorian culture to know that some traditions were non-negotiable, and the monarch leading from the front in major battles was one of them. "Then I will be at your side," he said simply. This time, no one in the War Council objected. His place as royal heir and the Queen's protector had become accepted, if not entirely understood, by the Zalorian High Command. The battle that followed was the largest and most coordinated engagement between the allied Earth-Zalorian forces and the Syndicate to date. Jimmy's strategy proved effective, with the diversionary force drawing significant enemy attention while the main fleet struck from an unexpected vector. Aboard the Crystalline, Jimmy stood on the bridge alongside Queen Cirilla, providing tactical advice as the massive ship led the charge against the heart of the Syndicate formation. "Their flagship is adjusting course to intercept us," reported the sensor officer. "Energy readings suggest they're preparing to fire their main weapon." "Evasive pattern Zaloria 3, Cirilla commanded. "Prepare forward plasma arrays for counterattack." The Crystalline shuddered as it executed a complex maneuver, narrowly avoiding the searing beam of energy that lanced from the Syndicate flagship. Retaliatory fire from the Zalorian vessel struck true, punching through the enemy's forward shields. "Direct hit," the weapons officer announced. "Their primary weapon system is offline." A cheer went up from the bridge crew, but Jimmy's attention was caught by an anomalous reading on one of the tactical displays. "Wait," he called out, pointing to the screen. "That energy signature, I've seen it before. When the Death Priest attacked us." Cirilla moved to his side, studying the display with a frown. "You're right, but the Death Priest is dead. You killed him yourself." "Maybe there's more than one," Jimmy suggested grimly. "Or maybe the title passed to a successor." Before they could discuss it further, the Syndicate flagship launched what appeared to be an escape pod, its trajectory taking it directly toward the Crystalline. "Intercept that vessel," Cirilla ordered. "It's too small to be a normal escape craft." "Impact in 15 seconds, the tactical officer called out. "Our weapons cannot lock onto it. It's using some kind of stealth technology." Jimmy's instincts screamed danger. "It's not an escape pod," he realized. "It's a boarding craft. They're sending someone directly after you." Cirilla drew her royal blade, its blue plasma edge humming to life. "Then we shall greet them appropriately." The impact came moments later, a controlled collision that attached the small craft to the Crystalline's hull. Alarms blared as the ship's integrity was compromised. "Boarding party detected in Section 7, Level 3, reported security. Moving toward the bridge." "Seal all bulkheads," Cirilla commanded. "Security teams to defensive positions. Continue the fleet engagement. We cannot lose momentum against their main forces." Jimmy drew his own weapon. The plasma dagger he had used in the temple, now replaced with a more substantial blade, designed specifically for his use. "I'm going to intercept them. They'll be expecting to find you here on the bridge." "We face this threat together," Cirilla countered firmly. "Sir Azor is commanding the diversionary force, and Commander Karma the secondary fleet. I trust my ship and my forces to continue the battle while we deal with this incursion." Jimmy knew better than to argue when she used that tone. Instead, he nodded to the security chief. "Lock down the bridge approach. Funnel them into the grand corridor where we have better defensive positions." The next few minutes were a flurry of activity, as bridge crews secured systems, and battle commands were transferred to secondary stations. Jimmy and Cirilla, along with the royal guards present on the bridge, took up positions in the grand corridor, a wide passageway lined with crystal columns that led to the bridge proper. They didn't have to wait long. The intruders blasted through the final bulkhead with surprising force, sending shrapnel flying. Through the smoke emerged a figure that made Jimmy's blood run cold. It was unmistakably another Death Priest, The same light-absorbing armor, the same spiked helmet, and a staff that pulsed with purple plasma energy. But this one was different somehow. Their movements more fluid, almost graceful compared to the brutal efficiency of the previous priest. Queen Cirilla Zaloria. The Death Priest's voice rang out, higher-pitched than its predecessor, but no less menacing. The 7 stars demand your blood for the death of our leader. Your cult will find no satisfaction today. Cirilla replied steadily, her royal blade held at the ready. Your leader fell to human ingenuity and Zalorian resolve. You shall meet the same fate. The Death Priest laughed, the sound echoing eerily through the corridor. You think killing one priest ends our legacy? The Death Priest is eternal, the mantle passing to the next worthy servant of the 7 stars. Your human pet merely accelerated the succession. Behind the priest, several Syndicate soldiers spread out, weapons trained on the Zalorian defenders. Jimmy assessed the situation rapidly. They were outnumbered, but the Grand Corridor's architecture provided them with some defensive advantages. I'm getting really tired of you cult types, Jimmy called out, drawing the Death Priest's attention. Maybe find a hobby that doesn't involve trying to kill queens? The Death Priest's helmet turned toward him, the featureless faceplate somehow conveying contempt. The human who thinks himself Zalorian royalty. Your interference in our sacred mission is an abomination. Yeah, Jimmy shrugged, subtly shifting his position to better protect Cirilla's flank. I've been called worse by better people. Without warning, the Death Priest thrust their staff forward, sending a bolt of purple plasma energy directly at Jimmy. He dodged, but not quickly enough. The edge of the blast caught his shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him into one of the crystal columns. The battle erupted fully then, royal guards engaging the Syndicate soldiers, while Cirilla confronted the Death Priest directly. Their weapons clashed in a shower of blue and purple sparks, the queen matching the cult leader's supernatural speed with practiced precision. Jimmy recovered quickly, ignoring the burning pain in his shoulder. He dispatched one Syndicate soldier with a quick thrust of his plasma blade, then moved to support Cirilla against the Death Priest. Fighting together, they pushed the cult leader back, their complementary styles creating openings for each other. Where Cirilla was elegant and precise, Jimmy was unpredictable and aggressive. The Death Priest, despite their enhanced abilities, found themselves increasingly on the defensive. Your coordination is impressive, the Death Priest acknowledged as they parried a simultaneous attack. But futile. The prophecy of the 7 stars cannot be denied. The old order must fall for the universe to evolve. I'm not big on prophecies, Jimmy retorted, feinting left before striking right. I prefer making my own destiny. The Death Priest's staff swept low, forcing both Jimmy and Cirilla to leap backward. The momentary separation gave the cult leader an opening to focus on Cirilla alone, driving her toward the end of the corridor with a flurry of attacks. Jimmy fought desperately to reach her, cutting down another Syndicate soldier in his path. He could see Cirilla holding her own, but the Death Priest's attacks were growing more frenzied, more powerful, fueled by fanatical purpose. Then, as had happened too many times before, Jimmy saw the moment when everything could go wrong. The Death Priest executed a complex twirling maneuver with their staff, creating a vortex of purple energy that momentarily blinded Cirilla. In that split second of vulnerability, the staff's bladed end thrust toward her heart. Time seemed to slow as Jimmy threw himself forward, not to intercept the blow this time, but to tackle Cirilla bodily out of its path. They crashed to the floor together, the Death Priest's staff embedding itself in the crystal wall where the queen had stood a moment before. Before the cult leader could recover their weapon, Jimmy rolled to his feet and drove his plasma blade directly into the seam between the Death Priest's helmet and body armor. There was a gasping sound, and then the purple glow of the staff flickered and died. The Death Priest collapsed, the light-absorbing armor suddenly seeming ordinary without the energy that had powered it. The remaining syndicate soldiers, seeing their leader fall, quickly surrendered to the royal guards. Jimmy helped Cyrilla to her feet, both of them breathing heavily from the exertion of battle. "You know," he panted, "I'm thinking of charging admission next time. 5 life-saving interventions should at least earn me a vacation." To his surprise, Cyrilla laughed, a genuine, unrestrained sound that echoed through the now quiet corridor. "Perhaps it should," she agreed, her composure momentarily set aside. "Though I believe I saved you this time, as much as you saved me." Jimmy considered this, then nodded. "Fair point. Maybe we can call this one a tie." The battle beyond the crystalline was concluding as well, with the combined Earth-Zolorian fleet decisively defeating the Syndicate forces. Reports streamed in of enemy vessels surrendering or retreating, their coordinated assault crumbling without their flagship's command. In the aftermath, as damage reports were assessed and casualties counted, Jimmy found a quiet moment with Queen Cyrilla in her private study aboard the crystalline. The ship was returning to Zoloria, bearing news of their most significant victory yet in the ongoing conflict. The death of the second Death Priest should cripple the Seven Stars cult, Jimmy noted as he studied tactical readouts. Without their religious leadership, the remaining Syndicate factions will have trouble maintaining cohesion. "Yes," Cyrilla agreed, "though we must remain vigilant. As we learned, the mantle of Death Priest can be passed to new leaders. Still, we've bought ourselves some breathing room." Jimmy set aside the tactical display and faced Cyrilla directly. "Which brings us back to our unfinished conversation from before." Cyrilla's ears twitched, nervous, perhaps, or anticipatory. "About your future?" "About our future," Jimmy corrected gently. "Whatever that might be." Cyrilla rose from her desk and moved to the viewport, gazing out at the stars streaking by as the crystalline traveled at high speed towards Zoloria. "In all my years of training to be queen, no one ever prepared me for this. For someone like you entering my life and changing everything." "I'm special that way," Jimmy quipped, moving to stand beside her, "causing royal chaos wherever I go." "Indeed." A smile touched her lips. "The question remains, what happens when the chaos settles? When the war is truly won and peace returns to Zoloria?" Jimmy considered this carefully. It was a future he had increasingly found himself contemplating during quiet moments between battles and councils. "I've been thinking about that. The role of royal heir comes with responsibilities, educational requirements, ceremonial duties, all of which you have approached with surprising dedication, despite your frequent complaints," Cyrilla noted. "Because I've come to care about this place," Jimmy admitted. "About its people, about its queen." The last words hung between them, laden with meaning that transcended political alliances or traditional obligations. "And if the queen has come to care about you in return?" Cyrilla asked quietly, her gaze still fixed on the stars. "If she finds herself contemplating traditions that have never before been broken, boundaries that have never been crossed?" Jimmy's heart raced. "I'd say that sounds exactly like the queen I've come to know, always pushing boundaries when it matters most." Cyrilla finally turned to face him, her expression more open and vulnerable than he had ever seen it. "The life debt began this journey between us, but I find that now, it is the least of what binds me to you. James Carson." Slowly, carefully, Jimmy reached out and took her hand, a gesture that would have been scandalous in public but felt perfectly natural in this moment. "Then maybe it's time we acknowledge that and stopped hiding behind tradition and duty." "And what would you call it instead?" Cyrilla asked, her fingers intertwining with his. "On Earth, we have a few different names for it," Jimmy said with a smile. "But I think partnership might be the best fit for now. 2 people who choose to stand together, not because they have to, but because they want to." "Partnership," Cyrilla tested the word. "It has a pleasing symmetry to it. Not ruler and subject, not debtor and creditor, but equals in purpose, if not in position. Exactly, Jimmy agreed. And maybe, over time, it could become something more. But there's no rush, no debt requiring immediate payment. Just possibility. Cyrilla's ears twitched rapidly, betraying emotion that her face couldn't quite conceal. I find I am increasingly fond of possibilities. James Carson. The Crystalline's return to Zaloria was marked by celebrations throughout the planet. News of the decisive victory against the Syndicate and the death of the second Death Priest spread rapidly, bringing hope to a population that had endured generations of conflict. A week after their return, a grand parade was organized through the capital city, with the combined forces of Zaloria and Earth marching side by side. Queen Cyrilla and Royal Heir James Carson rode at the head of the procession, mounted on magnificent royal white steeds. This time, Jimmy had spent enough time practicing to remain reasonably dignified on his mount, which seemed to have developed a grudging respect for him. Sir Azor rode nearby, now openly friendly with the human who had proven himself so many times. The streets were lined with cheering Zalorians, many waving both the royal banner and small earth flags that had been distributed for the occasion. Children perched on their parents' shoulders pointed excitedly as the procession passed, especially at the exotic human who had become part of their royal family. At the Grand Plaza, Queen Cyrilla addressed the assembled crowd, with Jimmy standing at her side rather than behind her, a subtle but significant change in protocol that did not go unnoticed by the political observers present. "Citizens of Zaloria," she began, her voice carrying across the hushed plaza. "Today we celebrate not merely a victory in battle, but a new chapter in our history. The Syndicate has been dealt a crippling blow, and the Seven Stars cult has lost its second leader. Our alliance with Earth has proven its worth beyond all doubt." Cheers erupted from the crowd, noticeably more enthusiastic and universal than during the previous celebration. For generations, we have adhered to our traditions, including the sacred life debt. When Royal Heir James Carson first saved my life, he invoked this ancient bond. Since then, he has placed himself between royal blood and death not once, but 5 times, a debt unprecedented in our history. The crowd murmured in amazement. 5 life debts was beyond anything in their cultural memory. Such extraordinary circumstances demand new traditions. Cyrilla continued. Therefore, I decree that the life debt between myself and James Carson is hereby transformed into something new, a bond of partnership between equal allies, representing the union of our 2 worlds. This announcement triggered a wave of surprised exclamations and excited conversation throughout the plaza. Jimmy, who had been briefed on the speech beforehand, but was still adjusting to the public nature of their evolving relationship, maintained a composed expression despite his racing heart. "Let this day mark the beginning of a new era," Cyrilla concluded, "where Zaloria and Earth stand not as distant allies, but as sister worlds, united in purpose and destiny." As the crowd erupted in cheers, holographic displays around the plaza projected images of the Queen and her royal heir side by side, symbols of a union that transcended traditional boundaries. The formal ceremony concluded with a joint review of the combined Earth and Zalorian forces, their armor and weapons gleaming in the sunlight. As Queen Cyrilla and Jimmy observed the parade from a royal viewing platform, Sir Azor approached them. "The troops have never looked sharper," Jimmy commented, watching the precise formations march past. "Indeed," Sir Azor agreed. "United purpose brings united strength." He hesitated, then added, "Your Majesty, if I may speak freely." Cyrilla nodded her permission. "Always, old friend." "This new bond of partnership you have proclaimed, it is unprecedented. Some of the older nobles are already whispering of impropriety, of excessive human influence." "Let them whisper," Cyrilla replied calmly. "Change always faces resistance, but I believe the people will embrace it as they have already begun to embrace James. Sir Azor nodded thoughtfully. I believe you are right. I have seen the way common citizens respond to him, with curiosity rather than fear, with hope rather than suspicion. It is refreshing. High praise from you, Sir Azor, Jimmy teased. I remember when you wouldn't trust me to sharpen your ceremonial dagger. And I remember when you could barely sit a royal white steed without falling off, the knight retorted with unexpected humor. We have all evolved, it seems. As the parade concluded, and the royal party prepared to return to the palace, Jimmy found himself contemplating how drastically his life had changed in the span of a few months. From mercenary to royal bodyguard, to royal heir to whatever this new partnership would become. That evening, a grand reception was held in the palace for military leaders, nobles, and Earth representatives. Jimmy, now comfortable in his formal Zalorian attire, modified to accommodate human physiology, moved through the crowd with growing confidence. He had learned enough about Zalorian customs to avoid major faux pas, though he still occasionally made minor errors that were now met with indulgent amusement rather than offense. Commander Karma approached him during a lull in the festivities, her formal military uniform adorned with new medals from the recent campaign. Royal heir, she greeted him with a respectful nod. Your strategy in the recent battle was unconventional but effective. I have recommended that certain elements be incorporated into our tactical training programs. High praise indeed, Commander, Jimmy replied, genuinely surprised. I thought you considered my methods undisciplined. They are, she confirmed without hesitation, but effective nonetheless. Perhaps there is value in controlled chaos, as you once suggested to Sir Azor. Controlled chaos, Jimmy repeated with a smile. That's a pretty good description of my entire life since coming to Zaloria. Commander Karma's ears twitched, in what might have been amusement. And yet, you have adapted remarkably well. Better than many Zalorians might have in reverse circumstances. Humans are good at adapting, Jimmy shrugged. It's kind of our specialty. Indeed. She studied him for a moment. The Queen's announcement today, this bond of partnership, it represents a significant departure from tradition. Jimmy tensed slightly, unsure where she was going with this observation. Yes, it does. I find that I approve, Commander Karma said, surprising him again. Traditions must evolve or die. You and the Queen are forging a new path that honors the spirit of our ways, while adapting to changing realities. It is most logical. Coming from the formerly skeptical commander, this was practically effusive praise. Jimmy raised his glass in acknowledgement. Thank you, Commander. Your support means a lot, especially given our rocky start. Indeed. Now, if you will excuse me, I must speak with the Earth military liaisons about our joint training initiatives. As Commander Karma moved away, Jimmy felt a presence at his side and turned to find Queen Cirilla, who had approached without his noticing. Making peace with old adversaries? She inquired, a hint of amusement in her voice. Apparently, Jimmy replied. She actually complimented my strategy. I'm beginning to think I've fallen into an alternate universe. Perhaps we all have, Cirilla mused, surveying the mixed gathering of Zalorians and humans, all conversing with increasing ease. One where ancient enemies become allies, traditions bend without breaking, and a human mercenary becomes royal heir to an alien throne. When you put it that way, it does sound pretty unlikely, Jimmy admitted. But here we are. Here we are, Cirilla echoed softly. As the evening progressed, music began to play, a surprising blend of Zalorian harmonics and Earth melodies that somehow worked despite their different origins. Guests paired off for dancing, some awkwardly attempting to bridge the gap between their different cultural traditions. Would you care to dance, Your Majesty? Jimmy asked impulsively, offering his hand. Cirilla's ears twitched in surprise. I was not aware you had studied Zalorian dance forms. I haven't, Jimmy admitted cheerfully. But I figure between your grace and my enthusiasm, we might manage something that won't completely embarrass either of our species. A ripple of murmurs spread through the gathering as the queen placed her hand in the royal air's and allowed him to lead her to the center of the floor. The musicians, after a moment of uncertainty, struck up a slower piece that incorporated elements of both cultures. Their dance was far from perfect. Jimmy occasionally missed steps or turned the wrong way, while Cirilla had to adapt to movements her body was not designed for. Yet, there was a harmony to their imperfection, a sense of genuine connection that transcended the technical flaws. As they moved together, the other guests gradually joined them, humans and Zalorians attempting to learn from each other's styles. What began as a formal diplomatic exercise evolved into something joyful and spontaneous, a true cultural exchange. Later that night, after the reception had ended and the palace had quieted, Jimmy and Cirilla found themselves on the royal balcony, gazing up at Zaloria's twin moons and the distant stars beyond. Earth was visible as a small blue point of light among the countless other stars. "That's home," Jimmy said quietly, pointing to the distant planet. "Or it was. I'm not sure anymore." "Do you miss it?" Cirilla asked, her tone gentle. Jimmy considered the question carefully. "Parts of it. Pizza. Saturday morning cartoons. The smell of rain on hot pavement." He smiled at her confused expression. "Earth things you'd have to experience to understand. But the funny thing is, I don't miss it the way I thought I would." "Because you have found purpose here?" "That's part of it," Jimmy acknowledged. "But also because, well, home isn't always a place, is it? Sometimes it's people, connections." Cirilla's hand found his, their fingers intertwining in what had become a familiar gesture between them when they were alone. In ancient Zalorian poetry, there is a concept called star home, the idea that true belonging exists not in physical locations but in the alignment between souls, like stars finding their proper constellations. "That's beautiful," Jimmy said softly. "And a little more poetic than home is where the heart is, which is what we'd say on Earth." "Both express the same truth," Cirilla observed. "That belonging transcends physical space." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars and the moons casting their silvery light over the capital city below. The sounds of continuing celebrations drifted up from the streets, where citizens were still rejoicing in their victory and newfound alliance. "What happens now?" Jimmy finally asked. "After all the parades and parties, the Syndicate is weakened but not destroyed. The Seven Stars cult could appoint another death priest." "Now we build," Cirilla replied. "We strengthen our alliance, integrate our forces, combine our knowledge and technologies. We prepare for whatever threats may come. But we also begin to imagine a future beyond constant warfare." "Sounds like a lot of work." "Indeed, but worthy work." She turned to face him fully. "Will you stay, James Carson? Not because of the life debt or the title of royal heir, but by choice? Will you help me build this future we've glimpsed?" Jimmy looked from Earth's distant light back to Cirilla's face, illuminated by the glow of Zaloria's moons. The choice seemed both momentous and surprisingly easy. "I'll stay," he said simply. "Not for the debt, not for the title. For you. For this partnership we're building. For whatever comes next." Cirilla's ears twitched rapidly, a sign of deep emotion that she no longer tried to hide from him. "I am gratified by your decision." Jimmy laughed softly. "That's very Zalorian of you. A human might say happy or thrilled, or even over the moon, which, considering your two moons, would be really over the top." "Perhaps I am still learning to express certain emotions," Cirilla acknowledged with a small smile. "We are taught from childhood to maintain composure at all costs. Well, as your official partner in this new alliance, I'm happy to help you practice being more expressive. Jimmy's tone was teasing, but his eyes held genuine warmth. Lesson 1. When someone says they're staying for you, the customary response is a hug. A hug, Cirilla repeated, as if considering a foreign concept. Physical embraces are reserved for family members in Zalorian culture. And what are we, if not a new kind of family? Jimmy challenged gently. Two worlds coming together, creating something that's never existed before. After a moment's hesitation, Cirilla stepped forward and somewhat awkwardly wrapped her arms around him. Jimmy returned the embrace carefully, mindful of his still healing wounds and the novelty of the experience for her. It was an imperfect hug. Her elongated ears accidentally brushed his face, and the unfamiliar contours of their different physiologies made finding comfortable positions challenging. Yet, like their dance earlier, there was something perfect in its imperfection, a genuine attempt to bridge differences and find new ways of connecting. When they finally stepped apart, Cirilla's eyes held a new light. I believe I understand the appeal of this human custom, she admitted. It is most effective at communicating certain sentiments. We have other customs too, Jimmy suggested with a hint of mischief. Some even better at communicating certain sentiments. Cirilla's ears twitched in what might have been embarrassment. Perhaps those lessons can wait for another time. Royal heir. Fair enough, Your Majesty, Jimmy conceded with a smile. We've got all the time in the stars. Below them, the celebrations continued. Citizens of two worlds mingling in the streets of the capital. Above, the twin moons of Zaloria shone down, while distant Earth gleamed like a blue jewel among countless stars. The life debt that had begun their journey together had evolved into something neither of them could have imagined. A bond not of obligation, but of choice. Not of tradition, but of innovation. Not of the past, but of the future. And as they stood together on the royal balcony, the Queen of Zaloria and the human who had saved her life 5 times over, both sensed that their greatest adventures still lay ahead, not as debtor and savior, but as true partners in whatever the cosmos might bring their way. From the deepest shadows of the Syndicate's hidden stronghold, a figure watched the transmission of Zaloria's victory celebration with cold calculation. The throne that had once held the Death Priest now supported a new occupant, slender, with features hidden behind a mask of shifting shadows. So falls the second Death Priest, the figure murmured, voice neither male nor female but something otherworldly. And yet, the 7 stars still burn. A subordinate bowed low. The cult remains loyal, Supreme One. We await your guidance as the new Death Priest. No. The figure rose, purple energy crackling around clenched fists. The time of priests is ended. They failed to adapt, clinging to old methods against evolving threats. The subordinate trembled. What shall we call you, then? The figure turned to gaze at a holographic display of Queen Cirilla and James Carson, standing together on the royal balcony. Death Sovereign. And unlike my predecessors, I understand what truly threatens us, not just their union, but what it represents. What is our next move, Death Sovereign? A cold laugh echoed through the chamber. We evolve. We adapt. We infiltrate. The Queen and her human pet believe they have won, that they have time to build their precious alliance. Let them build. Let them celebrate. When we return, it will not be as they expect. Purple energy coalesced around the Death Sovereign's hand, forming into a small orb that projected an image of a distant star system. The game has only just begun, and this time, we will rewrite the rules. The subordinate bowed again and backed away, leaving the Death Sovereign alone to contemplate the shifting cosmos and the new order they would forge from the ashes of the old. An order that would challenge not just Zaloria and Earth, but the very nature of life, death, and evolution throughout the stars.